Good evening. We're back with Raf Silverstone's Safe Space podcast with Amanda DeSensi, my co-host, and I'm really pleased to announce we've got Alex Duchene on the show. Pleased to meet you,
Hi,
Alex.
nice to
Let's be
meet
honest,
you
Jewish activist, mother,
now.
artist, advocate for Israel. What more can I say?
Yeah, I'm doing a lot right now.
You're a little
A
busy.
lot.
You're a little
I'm
busy.
busy. I'm busy.
Impressive.
I'm absolutely very busy right now. Yes.
Yeah. All good though.
Yeah.
Warrior.
Yeah.
We're going to take a look into Alex's personal life and go back to when she was a child and work our way through to present day. But Alex, what was your first happy memory?
Oh, that's a tough question. Because I actually have to think about it because there's not a ton. I can't think of like a one specific thing in particular. But I have to say, in terms of childhood happiness,
Yeah.
there was a period of time. I have a lot of family that lives in Miami, and for I would say 5 to 7 years, we were driving down to Miami every summer. So we would all jump into the car with my aunt and my cousins and seven of us in a station wagon, and we would do like the 3 day drive down to Miami. And then we'd spend, 10 days to 2 weeks there with our cousins, jumping around in the pool.
Nice.
Um, and that was fun. That was fun. So again, I can't remember like one specific day or one specific event, but I do remember that, as a kid, I looked forward to, yeah, being in Florida with my cousins, and there was a freedom to that I didn't experience the rest of the time. So yeah, that was awesome.
Do you have a big family? Do you have brothers,
I
sister?
do. Um, I have an older sister that I grew up with. I also have an older brother that I met about 7, 8 years ago that I didn't grow up with. But I had a big family. My mom comes from a large family. They were seven siblings. And most of them, had kids. And so when we would get together when I was a kid, and Saturday night, the family would get together. It was always at our house for some reason. My mom was kind of like the center of the
Okay.
siblings.
Yeah.
So a lot of stuff always happened at our house. Um, and we weren't rich. We were a very, very modest family. I wouldn't say poor, but we were, lower middle class. So it wasn't like we'd go out for dinner. It was like everybody would come over and, they'd sit, the adults would sit in the living room and yell about politics, and the
Yeah.
kids would go down to the basement and act stupid basically. And it was always like me and like 10 of my cousins.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I did grow up with that. And the friends that
That's
would come over, my besties would come over and sleep over. They all knew my family, and so yeah, I did grow up with a large family. That kind of changed as I got older. The family kind of scattered because of trauma.
yeah.
um
Okay.
yeah, but
That's unfortunate.
growing up, yeah, yeah,
Was it
large
a,
family.
was it upon reflection, or is it something that you knew at the time that something was wrong with your childhood, or something was wrong with a relationship within your childhood, I should say?
I always knew something was wrong, but I couldn't articulate it. I didn't have the words as a kid. And there were so many things that made me feel like, okay, maybe you're overthinking this. Maybe that's how all families are. Maybe this is okay, your mom is tough. You have a tough mom. You know what
Hmm.
I mean? Like she's
Yeah.
not hitting. And also because the abuse was with us was mental. It wasn't physical. It was physical. There were some few times that I actually remember when I was very, very, very young
Mhm.
that my dad hit me.
Oh,
Um, they don't think I remember. I'm sure like they probably wouldn't even think that I remember that because I was really young. But trauma does it that you can actually recall things as young as like 2 or 3,
For sure.
and it has these flash images. And when we were really young, there was some physical abuse, but that stopped very, very quickly. And then the abuse turned mental. And when the abuse is emotional and mental and all that, you tend to get told that you're lying, you're overreacting. Oh, it's
Mhm.
not so bad. When did your mom lay a finger on you? Never, and like you're
Yeah,
wearing nice clothes, you're going to private school. What the hell could be wrong? You know what I mean?
yeah.
Do you think
But
it was them being defensive, or do you think that they actually genuinely didn't feel like they were being abusive?
who? Sorry, say that again.
Your parents, do you think that they were being defensive when they wouldn't, or do you think that it was more that they genuinely didn't feel that they were abusive?
My mom to this day denies. My mom still thinks that she was an exemplary, she was a fantastic mother.
Mhm.
Listen, I mean, she was eventually diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and narcissistic personality disorder. And so, when we were growing up, we were hearing things like, I don't hit you. I'm such a good mom. You're so lucky.
Validation
You go to
for
grade
not hitting
school.
you. Yeah.
You go to private school. What the hell are you complaining about? You know what I mean? But by the same token, I'd wake up every morning to my mom telling me, "I wish you were never born."
There was
Every
Yeah.
single
zero accountability back
no,
when we were children,
no.
and it was acceptable to a point in
It
society
was,
then. Yeah.
and I think that's why in my family it kind of flew under the radar because we came from that generation where, parents still spanked their kids
Mm,
and still yelled at their like now it's like you yell at your kid and everybody's like,
Yeah.
whereas we come from a generation where, your parents yelled at their kids, you know what I mean? So
the neighbors
uh,
yelled. The neighbors yelled at us. It was
yeah,
acceptable.
so as a result,
Yeah.
whenever we tried to ring the alarm, we would get that reaction of Alex, like that's every kid, like your parents are tough, whatever, it is what it is, and they got beaten up when they were kids, and yet, but the difference was that, and this is what I didn't have the words to explain to other people back then, but now I do, is that I look at some of my friends that got spanked when they were kids and they were loved. And then when they would misbehave, they would get spanked.
Yeah.
That wasn't my situation. My situation was my mom never told me, I love you. Like to this day, I've never heard my mom say those words to me. There was no affection. There was no cuddling. My mom never cuddled with me. There were no bedtime stories. It was 24/7 fear, constant. The fear of your world is going to be taken away from you, your whole life is going to fall apart. Like it was every day. Like I'd go to school in the morning, and then when I would get on the bus to get back home at the end of the day, I would start the anxiety. I would get panic attacks. Like I had massive anxiety as a kid.
Didn't
And
have a
I
safe space,
feeling
so
because I didn't know what I was going to go home to.
Yeah.
Like we
yeah.
would sometimes go home where for no reason, like nothing had happened. And then we get home and there's a for sale sign in front of the house. And we're like, what's going on? And my mom would say, like, I can't do this anymore. We're selling the house. I'm putting you guys into foster care and we're done with
Wow.
this.
Oh
Like
my
for
gosh.
no reason.
That's
Um,
wow.
and so this was daily for, the first 20 years of my life. So that does a number on you, you
Yeah,
know.
that's complete emotional abuse. I mean,
It was
what would
beyond.
happen that she would take the sign down? Like, would there be some resolution to the current conflict, or just it would blow over?
Uh, there was a lot of there was the calm, which was not calm. It was calm in the sense that we weren't in massive crisis, but it was still yelling and mental abuse and shouting and calling us names and micromanaging. Like we weren't allowed. Like she would time our showers. We
Oh,
weren't allowed to close our bedroom doors. She literally, when I was a teenager, took my door off my hinges for 3 years because she didn't understand that I needed privacy as a teenager. And she was like, no, you're in my house. I need to know what you're doing all the time. So it was, is that, and that was when it was calm. And then something would set her off. And then we'd go into crisis where it would escalate to this boiling point where it would last anywhere between 7 or a week, 2 days to like a week,
Oh,
where things would really get bad. We would miss school. She would hold us hostage sometimes at knife point. Like we
Wow.
would literally miss school and the school would think that we were sick, but the reason we weren't going to school was because she was standing in front of the door with a knife for 3 days, telling us like, if you try to get out, like I'll kill you.
wow.
Um,
Where
and
was
then and then
where?
eventually, like after 3 days, I guess she would get exhausted herself and things would
Yeah,
eventually kind of wind down. And she'd be like, we're not done here, but we're not done here. Watch out. Like, you
But she
know,
needed a break from
but
the
she
chaos.
needed a break, right?
Yeah.
From the chaos. And then we go back to like normal,
Yeah.
whatever that normal was, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
But it was crazy. It was crazy. And nobody really, everybody knew my mom was like, my friends were like, okay, your mom's a bit nuts, because
Yeah.
they'd come to my house and they would hear the yelling and they were, but nobody really knew the level of the abuse until much later, really.
Yeah.
where was your father? And did her abusive side overlap onto him and kind of subdue him?
So my mom was incredibly abusive to my dad as well. My
Uh-huh.
dad was very intro. I'm sorry, my dog is a bit, yeah. Very introverted, not the strongest person. Um, and I understand now. For a long time, I was angry at him for not standing up for us. Now that I'm older and I've kind of unwrapped a lot of the stuff and I've peeled away the layers and all that, I understand because I remember the words, when we would be in those crises, she would tell my dad, leave, leave.
Yeah.
And I know now that a lot of men would have left.
Yeah. For sure.
And he wasn't able to stand up to us, but the one thing that he always said is, I'm not leaving without my daughters. And
Bless
so I
him.
think that his way, he felt like if I can't stand up to her, then I'm going to endure the abuse with them.
Yeah.
And that was kind of his way of
Yeah. He's
dealing.
protecting you somehow. Yeah.
He's like, I'm not going to leave them alone in this hellhole. I'm not going to leave. I'm not going to walk out. But she was extremely abusive to him. And he was not a strong person. My dad was, he was very passive. He was a very soft-spoken man. I loved my dad. My dad was loving. Like, my dad could have had a great life
Yeah.
had he not met my mom.
Yeah. Well, you know.
Alex, I have to ask, what was your darkest moment as a child? Do you know?
As a child,
Mm,
I mean, I remember again, my memory is very fractured because I dissociate a whole lot when I was a kid, a lot, like scarily.
yeah.
I think I remember being a kid and going through a phase where I was dissociating so much that I thought something was wrong with my brain, but I was afraid to say anything to anybody or talk about it because I was like, you're broken. And if you're broken, they're going to send you away, kind of thing. That's kind of how I was, so I just didn't talk about it, but I remember that feeling of dissociation, of feeling like I had missed time. I wasn't remembering certain things. Also, as a teenager, like I remember my friends like telling me, remember when we did, and I'd be like, I don't remember that. And then they showed me pictures and I didn't
Wow.
remember taking the pictures.
That must have been startling.
Oh,
That's,
it was
yeah.
scary.
Yeah.
And then after that, I think as a not as a child, not necessarily as an adult, when I was 18, I was raped when I was 18.
Oh my God.
So sorry.
Yeah.
And I couldn't, like, I didn't have the support system where I could tell anybody.
Yeah.
And I knew immediately, like, it was instant that, I woke up the next day and I was like, if you God forbid, trust her with this. She's going to turn it against you. She's going to make you responsible for it, and she's going to use it to attack you. And I knew that. And so I suppressed it. But the realization that, like, I felt sorry for myself
Yeah.
that I didn't have family that I could talk to about this.
Of
Like,
course.
that was really painful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you,
That's like,
did you, sorry, Amanda, go on.
that's, yeah, that's really just adding trauma to a horrific. You had no escape, you had no safe space, you had
No,
no.
I literally like I went home the next day and I made the conscious decision. I was very at that point, like I was 18, I had developed some really good coping mechanisms. I had become my own best friend. And I was very good at putting things in boxes and compartmentalizing. And I literally went home that day. I was like, Alex, put it away. It never happened. And I put it in a drawer, I closed the drawer, and I didn't talk about it for 23 years of my life. Not a soul. And that was my way of surviving. Like I was like, you'll deal, like I already, like I knew that I was gonna have to deal with it,
Yeah.
but
On your terms.
not just on my terms. I was barely keeping my head above water at the time. So I was like, wait till you can get out of the water first and then you'll deal with it. So I was like, you'll deal with it in 20. I kind of knew that it was going to come back and haunt me 20 years later, which it did. It always does. But that was my way of surviving at the time. There was no other option for me at all. My
Was
mom
the
would.
person involved in your day-to-day life? Did you have to see him again? Did you have to?
I didn't have to see him again. I had to see him again eventually. Um, I'm not gonna say who or whatever, obviously not. I
Of
mean, I know we're
course.
not, whatever,
No.
but I'm not gonna, but I will say that this is a relative. This is somebody who I was close to, and this is somebody who I'm related to. So a few years later, there was a family function that I kind of had to be at, and he was there, and I had to pretend that, nothing happened. And I was also still in denial about the whole thing. So I was okay pretending. It felt actually better. Yeah.
Have you had therapy?
Oh God, I've seen maybe 15 different therapists in my life over the
Anybody,
last
anyone
20
in
years.
particular that you felt was the person that was helping you?
Um, I can't say that I've ever found that one therapist, like, you see in the movies, people have this amazing relationship with their therapist. I never
Yeah.
had that. Most therapists that I saw something set me off. I was going through something in particular and I looked for a therapist, found a therapist, saw that therapist for about 2 years. We dug into some of my stuff and dealt with the issue at hand at the time.
Yeah.
I stopped and then I progressed to another. But there were certain therapists, yes, that do stand out. Um, and I remember one particular therapist with who I actually did a lot of the digging deep into the trauma and the childhood, and I remember him pretty much telling me, like, based on what I went through and like just statistically, he's like, you should be an addict, you should be homeless, you should be,
Yeah,
probably
agreed.
like
Yeah,
you, based on what I went through, the level of abuse that I went through, like he's like, you're highly functioning. And I'm an overachiever, so it worked in my favor in that. But yeah, so it was kind of validating to hear that because yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely. Most people would endure one trauma, and I always say that instead of asking a person why they do something, I take the approach of why wouldn't they be that way? So I can definitely see that as a huge sign of resilience. Maybe that should be gratifying for yourself to hear that for sure.
Yeah, yeah. It really validated a lot of what we went through, definitely. Yeah.
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 at any point did this actually come out within the family?
Sorry?
At any point, did this Alex, like what you said about your relative, did it actually come out at all, or have you kept it secret all this time?
The rape?
Yeah,
No, it hasn't.
that's
This,
testament. Yeah, that's testament to your strength. It really is.
no, it hasn't come out. And, I thought about it. I thought about confronting him. And if I'm ever in a situation where I'm in the same room with me and the opportunity comes up, I will not shy away, but I won't actually go like seeking it out because I could possibly go the rest of my life without having to ever see him again. But I believe in karma, and karma gave him two daughters.
Oh,
Wow.
Um, and if I ever see him, I don't have to plow into him. The only thing I'm going to say to him is, if you close your eyes and you imagine a man doing to your daughters what you did to me, tell me you wouldn't take a fucking baseball bat and go knock
Yeah.
the fucking shit out of him. Tell me you wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
And that's all you need to know, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
how have you maintained control all this time? I mean, as your therapist said, you should be homeless, be an addict. What was burning inside you? What was driving you forward?
Um, I love life.
Uh-huh.
I'm an extremely passionate person. Um, I'm also very self-destructive, and I could have gone down that road had I not had kids.
Okay.
And that's one thing I always say, like my kids saved me. Liam, specifically my older son, um, saved my life because once he was born, I knew that I had to make, because it's very easy to replicate the behaviors that you grew up seeing.
Yeah.
Very easy. Even if you don't want,
Very.
when I got married the first time, like the first, year of living with my first ex, I found myself saying things to him that I would hear my mom say as a kid
Mm.
that I had promised myself I would never say to anybody. And then I worked on that. I corrected it. I fixed it. But even more so when I had my son, I was like, there's no way, there's absolutely no way in hell. Like I made the decision the day he was born that I was going to be a cycle breaker and that I was not going to replicate what was done to me. And I also went to my husband at the time and I told him, and I said, if I ever become abusive, take him and leave.
Yeah.
I signed a
That's
paper. I actually wrote it down and signed it and gave it
wow.
to him
Wow.
because I
Wow.
wanted to be accountable. And as painful as that would have been, I told him, like, I will not hurt my kids the way my parents hurt me. And if I ever find myself doing that, I want you to take our child and get the fuck out.
Amazing. That's
So,
such
so
strength.
um, and then when I had my kid, it was just like at the beginning, I started doing better for him. And then, then you start doing better for yourself eventually. But at the beginning, it was for him, it was like, okay, if you're not going to do it for you, then you have to be okay. You have to be okay for him.
Gave you purpose.
Was you maintaining a relationship with your parents at this point after the birth of your first child?
I was. So I didn't speak to my mom for about 2 years before I got married. Because when I left my parents' house, I didn't leave in good terms and she didn't want to accept it. And I was just like, well, fuck off. You're going to have to accept it. And eventually she came around right before my wedding and she ended up coming to the wedding and everything was okay. And then, yeah, at the time I had a relationship with them, but I had boundaries. But I grew up in a Jewish family
Yep.
with that mentality of blood is stronger, like blood is thicker than water, and
Yeah.
you like the concept of like not talking to your parents or like cutting off your like that's not acceptable, like especially back then, like things are
Yeah.
changing, but back then like the
Yeah.
concept of like, but it was like you're not going to speak to your mother? She's your mother. What are you thinking? Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And so because of that, I maintained the relationship. Um, and I also like I wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt. I didn't want to deprive my son from a potential relationship with his grandparents. So I was like, okay, see how she is with him. So there was a lot of like, kind of like taking it one step at a time and, testing things around and seeing how she was. And there were things where she was actually great. She
Yeah.
actually, she loved her grandson. Uh, but there were times when she started to become a little bit controlling and trying to take over and made decisions that weren't hers to make. And I had to push back and put my foot down. Um,
So it was more second guessing of you and your parenting than necessarily being good or bad with your son. It was more like the issue
Well,
still
it was
you.
not, it's not, I don't think it was so much that she second guessed me. I think it's just because she's a bully and that's just how it was about bullying and because that's what
Okay.
she does. Like at the beginning, for example, like she wouldn't let my dad hold my son. Like every time I would put my son in his arms, like 2 seconds, like she would be like, "You're not doing it right." And she would,
Oh wow.
and and I remember like after a week of seeing that, I just rammed into her and I was like, he is, his grandson just as much as you are. And like if
Yeah.
he doesn't get to hold him, then you don't either. So like pick your battles because like this is not gonna happen.
Good.
So things like that, but then there were moments, where she lashed out at my son in order to hurt me. And every time that happened, the what's the word? The boundaries that I was setting were becoming more and more rigid. The walls were becoming higher. I would
Yeah.
punish her intentionally, and I would tell her. I was like, "You fuck this," and like there were times
Yeah.
where things would get really, really bad. Sorry if I swear a lot. Like
No,
I'm a
no,
cat.
cool. No, no, no,
It's like fuck this, fuck that. But
no.
there were times like the relationship was not there were a lot of yelling matches and a lot of fighting and times when things were really bad. And there were a lot of times when I was like, you better watch yourself because, keep going and you're never going to see your grandson again. Like I would threaten her with it.
Mhm.
Did your son give you a feeling of an element of control, even if it was just in one area with your mom?
Um, it wasn't so much control. It was more that this is mine and you will not touch it. Like you will not, like you can mess with anything else, but like this is mine.
Yeah.
I can tell by the look on your face how much
I
you
was
mean that.
extremely, extremely like protective and fiercely territorial of my kids.
And in a way, that's because of her. I mean, that's
Oh,
why you
absolutely.
had to be that way. So
Absolutely.
yeah, it makes
Absolutely.
perfect sense. It comes full circle. And
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, it was fucked up. It was fucked up. Definitely.
Yeah.
Where do you find yourself with after your first husband? How did that come apart?
So I got brutal postpartum depression after my son. And then that kind of snowballed I mean, I was never diagnosed because I didn't go to the hospital or anything, but what can I can call some sort of breakdown. I woke up in the middle of the night one night, just screaming and crying, and I literally cried and screamed for about 3 days. I couldn't stop. And then I fell into a very deep depression. And my husband was nowhere to be found. Nowhere. He was gone. And I had supported him. I had quit school to get a job to put him through school. I had helped him 2 months before we were supposed to get married. I found out that he was addicted to cocaine and that he had basically not paid the rent for like 8 months. Um, I stuck around. I got him through addiction. Um, and then when I went into my depression, he just wouldn't come home after work. He'd go to his buddies to watch hockey because he didn't want to deal with it. He didn't want to deal with like, my sorry ass. So, he would just not come home from work. He'd go to his friend's house, he'd go to his parents' house for dinner, and he would come home, at 11 o'clock at night or whatever. Um, and so I reached rock bottom. And again, like I love life. I'm a very, very, and I'm a strong motherfucker. And,
You are. You
and
are.
I reached rock bottom. I stayed there for a bit, feeling sorry for myself. And then after a while, I was like, okay, you're gonna get out of this. And I started working on myself. I wasn't seeing a therapist at the time because in Montreal at the time, I don't know how it is now, but to get a psychologist, like it's not free and I couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
But I was 25 and I already had, about 20 years of having to develop coping mechanisms. So I was very emotionally intelligent. So I figured out ways to kind of get out of the depression and work on myself. And when I felt strong enough, I gave him an ultimatum and he took it. And I was like, okay, pack your bags. Bye. Leave.
At this point, we're going to have to leave it. This is the end of part one. Thank you for your time, Alex. You've been
My
Thank
absolutely
you so
pleasure.
amazing.
much. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk soon.
Speak to you
Bye.
soon. Bye bye.